I will defend him. The courtroom fell completely silent. Every head turned, every eye fixed on the person who had just spoken. The voice was not trembling, not hesitant. It rang out sharp, firm, and entirely unexpected. A young black woman stood at the back of the courtroom. Her apron was still tied around her waist. Sweat glistened on her forehead as she clutched a worn folder tightly in her hands. A few people chuckled. Some lifted their phones to record. Whispers spread from the back rows. Who is she? Probably the cleaning lady. Let's see, maybe the security guard will take the stand next. Laughter rippled through the room, as if her presence was a cheap joke among the expensive suits. But Danielle Carter did not back down. At 26, she was used to condescending stares. But never had she felt so belittled standing among the legal elite of Manhattan in a room where justice was often reserved for those who could afford it. The judge frowned, clearly puzzled. Who are you? Danielle Carter, Your Honor, she said clearly. I would like to act as temporary counsel for Mr. Preston Langston. Just the mention of that name made the air grow heavy. Preston Langston, founding CEO of Nexora Systems, a self-made billionaire known for his defense AI deals, now faced charges of contract fraud and financial manipulation amounting to over $30 million. And at the very first hearing, his lead attorney had vanished no notice, no letter, no explanation. Hallway rumors claimed he had boarded an emergency flight to Iceland the night before. Before we continue the story, if you believe that courage, intelligence, and integrity don't come from degrees or titles, but from heart and perseverance, then this story is for you. Help our channel reach its first 1,000 subscribers by clicking like and subscribing. Your support motivates us to keep telling inspiring stories, where justice lives not just in courtrooms, but in anyone brave enough to stand for the truth. Now, back to the story, where a woman once ridiculed would make the entire legal system listen. Preston Langston sat at the defense table, beside the empty chair reserved for his lawyer, staring at Danielle in disbelief. You? He grunted. You should be home scrubbing floors, not pretending to be a lawyer in this circus. Laughter broke out again. Someone sneered. Did she bring a mop too? Danielle stood still. She opened her folder and spoke calmly. I've read every page of this case file. Every contract, every financial statement, every deposition. No one in this room understands the case better than I do. The judge raised his glasses. Do you have a law degree? No, Your Honor, Danielle replied plainly. I attended Howard Law School but had to drop out due to a family financial crisis. Since then, I've worked as a housekeeper for families in New Jersey to pay off debts and support my younger brother's education, but I've never stopped studying. I've followed every major federal case on financial fraud. I take notes, I research, and I analyze case files like my life depends on it. For a moment, the courtroom was completely silent. At the prosecution table, lead prosecutor Victoria Hensley, a white woman in a crisp navy suit, tilted her head, eyeing Danielle with an unreadable expression. Objection, she said. This situation severely violates due process and disrespects the integrity of the judicial system. The judge raised a hand, signaling order. Noted. However, since the defendant lacks legal representation, and if Mr. Langston agrees, I will allow Miss Carter to speak during today's preliminary hearing under strict supervision. Preston sat still, his face sour as vinegar. You expect me to let a maid represent me in federal court? He muttered. Danielle leaned down, her voice just loud enough for him to hear. I don't have a degree, but I know they're setting you up. And right now, I'm the only one here who doesn't want to bury you. He stared at her, blinking rapidly. Then, with an exasperated sigh, he waved a hand. Fine, do whatever you want. Danielle nodded and slowly walked to the defense table. Her footsteps echoed clearly, affirming her undeniable presence. She placed her folder on the table and opened it. Inside were densely handwritten notes, color-tabbed legal case references, and printed contracts, the very documents Victoria intended to use to bring Langston down. Victoria leaned back, half smirking. What did you bring? A shopping list and some highlighters? Danielle looked up, eyes razor sharp. I brought logic and evidence. The gallery murmured. The judge cleared his throat. Proceed, Miss Carter. Danielle stood and held up a document. On the 12th of March of last year, Mr. Langston's company was invited to revise a joint venture agreement with Aurelius Group. She pointed to a marked paragraph. The revision that the plaintiff claims was forged was signed from an IP address in Switzerland. But what's important, she raised an SEC filing dated 2 weeks before the alleged signing in, which the original terms were still in effect. That suggests, if there was any forgery, it may very well have come from the plaintiff's side. Silence spread like ripples in water. Victoria frowned. Preston leaned forward. Danielle continued speaking with a clear, unwavering voice. She had spent the past year poring over hundreds of legal files during her night shifts. While others slept, she learned to fight with knowledge and determination. The judge nodded slightly, his voice low. That's quite compelling. The court will recess to review the evidence and determine the next steps. Miss Carter, please return tomorrow. Danielle bowed her head slightly. Thank you, Your Honor. As she stepped down, her heart pounded, but the way people looked at her had changed. No longer pity. Preston Langston still sat quietly. But for the first time that day, he no longer looked alone. That night, Danielle sat alone at the old dining table in her basement apartment in Newark. Spread across it were the case files, scribbled notes, a half-eaten sandwich, and an old laptop playing a lecture from a law professor she once admired. She still wore her work shirt, stained with grease from that morning. She picked up a contract and frowned. The phrasing in the appendix seemed Auden-like the previous documents Langston had signed. She flipped open her notebook and quickly jotted a line. Compare clause syntax with prior contracts. Suspect foreign origin. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She answered. A deep male voice came through. You did well today. No one expected the girl in an apron to flip a courtroom like that. Danielle froze. Who is this? Just someone who was in that room. But remember, you're poking a hornet's nest. Be careful where you stick the rod. The call ended. Her hand trembled slightly, but she took a deep breath. Fear wasn't new to her. She'd grown up with it. But this time, the fear felt worth it. The next morning, Danielle arrived at the Langston estate earlier than usual. She entered through the side door that led to the kitchen, just like every other day, her gray coat lightly speckled with early spring rain. This time, she didn't bring cleaning rags or rubber gloves. In her hand was a new set of documents, something that could either save or destroy an empire. Preston Langston wasn't expecting her. When she knocked on the door to his study, the sound of it being opened carried a note of irritation. He was still in his white shirt, holding an untouched espresso. His eyes were cold. I didn't summon you here, he said flatly. And you didn't ask anyone to stand up and keep your name from being dragged through the mud either, Danielle replied, keeping her composure. Preston leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You think you changed anything yesterday? I think I cracked open a door. Now we need to throw it wide open. Danielle stepped forward and placed a printed page on his desk. I just reviewed every contract you signed last year. The amended version sent from the Swiss IP doesn't match the language used in any document ever issued by Nexora. The syntax, punctuation, even how partners are identified, it's all off. Preston glanced at the paper, then squinted. What are you suggesting? You didn't sign that contract yourself, Danielle stated plainly. Someone created the revised version, sent it from overseas, and approved it under your name. All the signs point to one person, Paul Temple. Embry. The name made Preston pause. My former assistant, he muttered. Exactly, Danielle nodded. The man who sat in every meeting with you, the one you trusted to prepare every document, the one who knew your schedule when you were online and when you weren't. He quit last month, Preston said vaguely. Said he needed a break, or wanted to distance himself from a lawsuit he helped set up. Danielle opened her bag and pulled out a phone photo. I visited the co-working space Paul used to rent in Jersey City. The place was a mess. Laptop gone, drawers yanked open. Looks like he left in a hurry. Preston took the photo. His face darkened. There was one file left on the floor, Danielle continued. Inside were 3 contracts identical to the one at the center of this lawsuit, but 2 of them have different metadata. One from Zurich, one from New Jersey. Metadata? The document's digital fingerprint. Edit timestamps, file creation locations, operating system used. It's like a digital signature. Danielle looked him straight in the eye. No matter how skilled a forger is, they always leave a trace. Preston placed the photo on the desk, heavy with thought. Can we use this in court? We need to get it validated by a digital forensics expert first. Otherwise, the plaintiff's attorney will dismiss it instantly. He sighed. I'll call my head of IT. No, Danielle cut in. No one else can know. Not until we're sure who's on our side. We don't know who's been compromised. Preston frowned. You suspect my entire team? I trust the evidence. People, she looked at him, her tone soft but firm. I need more time to track down the main data archive. I suspect Paul left something behind. That afternoon, Danielle took the subway to Midtown. The building where Paul had once rented a workspace was nestled between co-working offices and busy coffee shops. She followed his name to the third-floor directory and knocked on a small office door marked with a faded sign. Paul Temple, Contract Consulting. No answer. But the door was ajar. Danielle took a deep breath and pushed it open. The room was empty, just a few papers scattered on the floor, and the faint smell of burnt coffee in the air. A clear sign of a hasty exit. She stepped inside, eyes scanning the space. No computers, no storage devices, just one drawer still left open. Near the foot of the desk, she found a crumpled file folder. Inside were 3 copies of the same contract, just as she had told Preston with, clearly differing metadata. One marked Zurich, one marked New Jersey. Her hands trembling slightly, she stuffed them into her bag, snapping photos of each page. Just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Is this Danielle Carter? Yes, who's calling? You've made quite a splash. But you're also stepping on the toes of people who don't like being exposed. Next time, be more careful. Not everyone's polite enough to give a warning. She gripped the phone. Who are you? But the line had already gone dead. That evening, Danielle sat at her familiar basement dining table in Newark, yellow light casting long shadows on the patchy walls. Beside her were the documents she had recovered. She was sticking colorful notes on every detailed, very suspicious point, every odd data access. Among the pile, one handwritten note stood out. Match timestamps. Zurich versus New Jersey. Her phone buzzed. It was Regia, former classmate from Howard, now a freelance journalist. Reggie, I need help. Urgent. Don't tell me you're investigating a federal lawsuit. I'm not just investigating. I'm getting death threats because of it. On the other end, there was a long silence. What do you need? Reggie asked. Verify the metadata, trace the IPs, and if possible, check if anyone used a VPN to tunnel from Zurich. Okay, he said. But you're digging into the dirtiest corner of corporate law. Be careful. Danielle leaned back in her chair, eyes staring at the ceiling. I don't need safety. I need the truth. The next morning, Danielle arrived at the courthouse very early. She sat alone on the defendant's bench, clutching the case file to her chest. Preston Langston had not yet arrived. That didn't worry her. She had long been used to working alone from the nights, studying law by flashlight in the basement laundry room, to now, when a federal trial hinged on her voice. A while later, Preston walked in. For the first time, he gave her a slight nod. No thank you, no compliment, but for someone like him, that nod was an acknowledgement in itself. Soon after, Victoria Hensley entered the courtroom, tall, confident steps, and her usual cold smile. She glanced at Danielle, tilting her head with a grin, not friendly, but the kind that said she still believed the game was in her hands. Good morning, Victoria said sweetly. Ready for round 2, counsel? Danielle didn't respond. She stood up, adjusted her case file, and walked straight to the podium. When the judge entered, the courtroom fell into silence. We will resume with the examination of evidence regarding the alleged fraudulent contract, the judge declared. Does the defense have anything to add? Danielle stood, her voice clear and firm. Your Honor, I respectfully submit a metadata comparison of 2 contract versions, one sent from Zurich, one from New Jersey. Additionally, I will present linguistic differences showing that the alleged forged contract does not follow Nexora Systems' standard legal structure. And slam. Victoria immediately stood. Objection. This chain of evidence lacks authentication. It could have been fabricated after the fact. Danielle remained composed. Your Honor, I submitted these documents to an independent digital analysis expert. The validation report is included. Cronin Data Forensics has officially confirmed the timeline and origin of the files. The judge flipped through the report, skimmed it, then nodded. Proceed. M. Danielle opened the original contract and pointed to the contested clause. Your Honor, the revised section uses language patterns similar to European corporate contracts, specifically Swiss formatting. However, all previous contracts signed by Mr. Langston follow standard American legal language. This strongly suggests that the paragraph was inserted from a foreign source. The courtroom fell silent once again. Preston leaned forward slightly, his eyes showing a mix of suspicion and admiration. Victoria pressed her lips together. Motion to adjourn, she said. We need time to verify this. We already verified it, Danielle replied promptly, pulling out another document. This report was extracted from the hard drive of Paul Temple's former office. It contains 3 contracts, 2 with distinct metadata identical to the contract under litigation. And Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but the judge raised a hand. We will review this. Court is recessed to examine authenticity. As she exited the courtroom, Danielle stepped into the hallway feeling like she had just walked through a silent storm. Preston followed, quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," Danielle replied, eyes still forward. "Just don't ever underestimate a woman in an apron again. M." That night, she returned to her small apartment in Newark. The room was quiet. All that remained was the dim glow of her desk lamp and the ever-growing case file. She brewed a cup of tea, took slow sips, then opened the file and continued studying. Under the desk, something brushed her foot. She reached down and picked up a small envelope, torn at one corner. No sender listed, only a faint logo of Aurelius Group. She opened it. Inside was an old printed memo, the text slightly smudged, dated 6 months before the lawsuit. The memo discussed restructuring negotiation terms with Nexora Systems via strategic legal measures. At the bottom was a handwritten note. If the other party refuses to cooperate, litigation pressure may force them into bankruptcy or selling off shares. Danielle read the note over and over, a chill running down her spine. This wasn't just fraud. This was a premeditated scheme, planned, deliberate, and organized. She placed the memo into a separate evidence folder and wrote a red note. Litigation premise: manufacture conflict, forced bankruptcy, or hostile buyout. The next morning she called Reggie. "I need to verify a name." "Go ahead." "Martin Lyles, former private equity partner, now legal advisor at Aurelius Group. His name appeared in some emails I saw at court." Reggie sighed. "You really are digging where no one wants to dig. All right, I'll have someone pull original records." That evening, they met at a small diner near the newsroom. In the dim light, Reggie handed her a thin file. Lyles was tied to 2 internal complaints involving document falsification, both settled out of court. One of the whistleblowers later died in a car accident in Jersey City. No autopsy performed. Danielle froze. She closed her eyes and leaned back in her seat. "Are you sure you want to keep going?" Reggie asked quietly. "There's still a way out." "There's no way out for me," she replied. "I'm not doing this for Mr. Langston. I'm doing this for the hundreds of others, the ones who never even get the chance to speak." Reggie looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we continue." The next morning, the courthouse was packed. Rumors of the Maid defending the billionaire had spread across Manhattan like wildfire. Microphones from major news outlets pointed toward the gates of the federal courthouse. But Danielle Carter maintained her slow, steady pace, her calm gaze, and her gray coat-like armor she had worn through the past few days. Victoria Hensley arrived with 2 men in gray suits behind her, not colleagues this time, but private legal advisors. Their presence made one thing clear: the plaintiff was afraid. Danielle entered the courtroom, placed a thick case file on the desk, and glanced at Preston. He gave her a slight nod, saying nothing. But his expression was no longer the same as it had been in the beginning, no longer skeptical, no longer dismissive, but acknowledging. When the judge entered, it was as if all sound had been vacuumed out of the room. "We will continue reviewing the newly submitted materials," he said. "Miss Carter?" Danielle stood and spoke with clarity. "Your Honor, I submit an internal memo from Aurelius Group, which clearly outlines a plan to restructure its relationship with Nexora Systems through legal measures if the proposed terms were not accepted. This document was found in my personal work area at Mr. Langston's residence, where no one else had access." The judge flipped through the pages. "Is the source verified?" "Yes, Your Honor. I provided a copy to a third-party digital forensics expert. Additionally, I verified the digital signature matches Aurelius's internal server." Victoria shot up. "Objection. This is private information obtained unlawfully, violating privacy rights and legal procedure." Danielle didn't back down. "The document was abandoned in a shared living area, and if the content reveals collusion, the court has full discretion to admit it." The judge paused, then nodded. "The court acknowledges the submission and will consider its evidentiary value." Danielle turned toward Victoria. Her eyes no longer held hesitation. She knew she was getting closer to the truth. She knew this time they couldn't twist the facts anymore. After the hearing, she stepped outside and took a deep breath. Spring was beginning to creep into the corners of New York. But the air today felt colder than usual, not because of the weather, but because of an invisible shadow trailing behind her. Preston approached. "Do you know what you've just done?" "Turned a civil suit into a criminal investigation," she replied bluntly. He fell silent, then asked, "What do you need from me?" Danielle looked at him for a moment. "Full access to all internal records regarding Aurelius emails, draft contracts, board meeting notes, everything. No more surprises." "1." Preston nodded. "You'll have it by tomorrow morning." That night, when Danielle arrived home, she found a white envelope slid under her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed with bold black letters. Be careful of the hill you choose to die on. No signature, no logo. But the message was unmistakably clear. She held the paper up and burned it in the sink with an old lighter. The flame rose slowly, cold. That same night, she called Reggie. I need to back up everything. They met at their usual diner. Danielle placed a USB stick on the table, a printed technical report, and a list of internal emails that Preston had forwarded to her that morning. Reggie flipped through the papers. This just keeps getting dirtier. In here, there's an email thread between Paul Temple and Martin Lyles. The subject lines include, accelerate timeline, urgent revisions, sign before Langston returns. It's clear they targeted the exact window when Preston was out of town when he couldn't review the documents. So they deliberately timed it to catch him off guard? Reggie asked. Exactly, Danielle nodded. And when he refused to sell his shares, they filed the lawsuit to apply legal pressure. Reggie exhaled, studying her. You're not doing this for Langston, are you? No, Danielle replied. I'm doing this for the ones who never had a chance to fight back. People like me living in basements, entering through side doors, reading legal codes in the dark, and ignored by the system. The next morning, Danielle returned to Paul Temple's former office, where she had first found the altered contract. The room had been locked since her last visit. But with a bit of persuasion, the building manager allowed her back in to retrieve any remaining personal items. Inside, it was still cold, covered in dust. But this time, the desk drawer held something new. A small black notebook. Danielle opened it. Most pages were filled with random notes, appointment dates, shopping lists, but tucked between page 4 was a yellow sticky note, hastily scribbled in red ink. Zurich package, code 2000-913. Her heart skipped a beat. She pulled out her phone and searched New Jersey's storage systems. An hour later, she stood in front of Secure Waste Storage in Jersey City, a facility that specialized in secure document storage for businesses. She walked straight to the front desk and handed over the sticky note and her ID. The receptionist glanced at it, checked the system. Ah, yes. That code was checked in 8 weeks ago. Still valid. Room 14, second row on the left. Danielle received the key, heart pounding. Inside the locker was a thick manila envelope, sealed with red wax bearing an embossed L. She gently opened it. A USB stick and a printed memo marked Classified Internal Legal Counsel Only. The memo was from Martin Lyles, addressed to the executive board of Aurelius. It outlined in detail how to establish legal pressure, modify contract terms, create virtual IP chains via Swiss VPNs, and even explicitly stated the objective, to force Nexora to relinquish shares within 6 months through fabricated litigation. Her hands clenched tightly. This was no longer suspicion. This was proof of a calculated scheme planned long before Preston signed anything. She stuffed everything into her bag and stepped out of the building. Light rain continued to fall. But inside Danielle, the real storm had only just begun. On the morning of the final hearing, the sky over New York was gray, as if holding its breath. Danielle Carter stood in front of the Southern District Federal Courthouse, still carrying the thick case file this time, not just filled with evidence, but with the entire story she was about to tell before the whole nation. Inside the USB she had found at the storage facility in Jersey City were numerous documents, internal emails, financial spreadsheets, draft contracts with timestamps matching the dates. Preston was away on business. All of it linked to the name Martin Lyles and the Aurelius Group. Along with that, Reggie had helped her validate everything through an independent team of digital forensic experts. The evidence was irrefutable. Danielle entered the courtroom with a straight back and a steady gaze. For the first time, the public didn't see her as a reckless maid, but as a warrior, wearing wool instead of a lawyer's robe. The judge opened the session. Today, he said, we will review the new evidence submitted by the defense, including email chains, financial reports, and a memo filed under the label classified. The defense may proceed. Danielle stood, walking to the center of the courtroom. Your Honor, she said, her voice firm, I submit additional evidence. An internal memo signed by Mr. Martin Lyles, legal counsel to the plaintiff, outlining a legal strategy to force Nexora Systems into relinquishing shares through fabricated litigation. Furthermore, the accompanying documents indicate the use of foreign VPNs to simulate contract signing from Zurich. The courtroom stirred. Victoria Hensley was absent. In her place stood a new attorney, pale-faced, stiff posture. He stood and objected. The court cannot rely on documents obtained outside the standard chain of custody. There is no assurance this evidence has not been tampered with. Danielle replied succinctly, All items have been verified by 3 digital forensic experts. Full validation reports are included, along with confirmation from Secureway Storage's independent archive system, where the materials were preserved intact for the past 2 months. The judge took the file. After several minutes silently flipping through the pages, he looked up. If this documentation is authentic, this case is not merely baseless. It is a systematic criminal conspiracy. He turned to the plaintiff's attorney. Does the plaintiff have anything further to add? The attorney shook his head. We request a continuance for internal review. Denied, the judge said. The court will refer all records to the U.S. Attorney's Office for investigation into forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to destroy a business. This hearing is hereby concluded. The court dismisses the lawsuit against Mr. Preston Langston. There was no applause in the courtroom, only a long wave of silence, like someone had dropped a weight into a still lake. Preston bowed his head slightly toward Danielle. He said nothing, but in his eyes was an emotion never seen before. Gratitude, respect, and perhaps a touch of shame. As Danielle exited the courthouse, she was surrounded by reporters. One shouted, "Miss Carter, is it true that before representing Mr. Langston, you cleaned his house?" Danielle paused. She nodded. "Yes, and I still clean his kitchen 3 times a week. But that has never stopped me from reading the law." The crowd fell silent. No one laughed anymore. That evening, she met Reggie again at their usual diner. He handed her a new USB, a complete backup of the entire case. "You think it's all over now?" he asked. "It's just beginning," she replied. Reggie nodded. "And now what?" Danielle smiled softly. "I'm drafting a proposal for a new initiative, the People's Law Project, a place that offers free legal support for working-class people, immigrants, and those who have no voice." A week later, at an outdoor press conference, Danielle stood at a modest podium set up in Union Square Park. Behind her was a banner that read, "Justice needs no robe, just courage." "One," she spoke. "I'm not a lawyer. I don't have an office. But I have eyes that see injustice and a heart that refuses to stay silent." This case wasn't just about a company being deceived. It was about millions of people being locked out of the legal system because they don't wear suits or hold degrees. The crowd erupted in applause. Among them was Elise, the young woman who once worked at Aurelius and came forward as a whistleblower. She stood still, tears rolling down her cheeks. At the end of the event, Danielle stepped off the stage. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She picked up. "Is this Carter?" "Yes. My name is Cassandra. I clean offices in Midtown. Last week I saw something wrong, and they told me to stay quiet. But I can't. I don't know what to do." Danielle smiled. "You just did the most important thing. You spoke up. And now, you're not alone anymore." She ended the call and looked toward the lights shining across New York City. For the first time in many years, Danielle felt like she wasn't on the outside anymore. She didn't need a degree to be a voice for justice. She just had to do what was right once, then again, and again, forever. And so the story of Danielle Carter comes to a close, from a housemaid once looked down upon to the woman who made an entire power structure bow before the truth. If this story touched you, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the like button and click subscribe now. That will be a powerful motivation for us to keep telling stories like this. Stories of justice, compassion, and hope. We'll see you again on the next journey, where ordinary people still rise and reshape systems once thought unchangeable. While you wait for the next story, I've already picked a few videos I think you'll want to watch. They're waiting for you right here. Wishing you a peaceful day, and may you always be heard for your true worth.